Hey everyone, so we're following up the legendary PvP hero tier list today with the epic PvP hero tier list. Now, just like the legendaries, I do want to introduce the scoring system. So the way that we have this scored out today is we have our S tier heroes. These are the heroes that can deal with multiple threats, multiple different kind of first pick units from the opposing enemy. Never truly really a bad pick. A tier, viable threat, but will need some support. They can't do it alone. B tier, solid support, a possible threat, maybe even decent counter pick with some additional upside. Might deal with one or two of the picks from the opponent whenever it comes to either arena offense or RTA. C tier, this is more of a mediocre support or a threat, maybe some slight upside if it goes unanswered. And then the D tier is just like a niche counter pick. It's specifically for one possible interaction within the match, and hopefully that wins you the game. And then the F tier is just completely useless, or it's a PvE related hero. So the way I have this, worked out this time, I already put the heroes in their slots. Hopefully the video is a little bit shorter. I'm still going to walk through why I think the heroes are in the way that they are. But yeah, this should be a much quicker video than the legendary one. So getting started, our first and only true S tier hero in the epic section is Fire Melissa. This hero has really come along. She is a extremely strong epic. She has the ability to one-shot Desdemona. She has the ability to one-shot Dark Ophelia. She has the ability to one-shot Elise. Who else? Guan Yu, Jerome. Like the applications that she has are just absolutely endless. So she is truly an S tier hero. She doesn't need any kind of support. She can be put in assassin gear and she will just snipe the biggest threat that your opponent has if she goes unchecked, or if they don't bring in some kind of stat enhancer similar to like a Tara or a Brand, or that's basically really all I can think of. Somebody who maybe gives shields to everyone. I can't really even think of anybody that does that, to be honest, other than Brand. Oh, maybe like Sacred Windstrex, who's actually on this list. But yeah, so she is the true S tier. So moving on to A tier, you have people like Bocce. Bocce can just completely clear a tank team. He does need some support, though. He's fairly slow. And with the introduction of relics, there are some heroes that can even tank Bocce's ultimate ability now. So it is something that you need to be aware of. But if you bring some kind of stat booster with him, whether it's, additional damage, if it's speed, like with Halia, she brings her Ocean Lights that amplifies damage, this will make Bocce a true threat. Next up is Oria. I actually think people are really sleeping on Oria, and it's an interesting concept because she is similar to the other crowd control heroes on this list, in the fact that crowd control mitigation is starting to become a real thing in RTA and Arena, with the immunity set being released. On top of that, you have heroes like Karma, you have heroes like Colona and Royce, which are also in the A tier, as you can see here. But the difference between Oria and all of the other crowd control heroes is Oria doesn't even need a turn. She literally can be picked, and if she is Ascension 5 and she's picked in the right application where you're dealing with a speed unit and an attack unit, she's already done her job. This is completely different in comparison to other heroes that we see on this list, like Anam Maros or Tidecaller. They need to be fast enough. They need to actually go. And Oria doesn't need to do that. She does have plenty of counters, but if she goes unchecked, she can really control the outcome of a game. And I think she's really underrated and certainly deserving of the A spot. There's a lot of times where I will pick her and she completely controls the game. She allows my heroes to pick and choose who they want to kill. She taunts people. She gives herself, some kind of healing with her self-restoration effect. Very, very strong. I think she is definitely a top-tier epic still, and definitely underutilized. Next, we have Colona. So Colona, a later introduction to the light and dark epics. She came along the same time as Royce as a cleanser to some kind of crowd control units. Very, very strong. She has a unique ability that she gives someone control immunity, cleanses, and then gives them invincible for the entire turn. It's a very strong ability. I will say, a lot of her application comes in the form of trying to mitigate someone like Cordelia, and I have seen time and time again that Colona kind of needs Ascension 5 where she can cleanse on her trait ability, to counterattack whenever somebody gets crowd controlled up to twice per turn. It does seem really, really important. But with that being said, she is a top tier support unit, especially in the epic slot, and still usable for sure, even if she is not Ascension 5, but she becomes a lot stronger with that Ascension 5. She's probably more of a C tier or B tier hero without the Ascension, but with the Ascension 5, she is definitely an A. So next up we have Royce. Royce, another very fantastic unit when it comes to cleansing of crowd control. So he's really good against people like Oria. On top of that, if he's Ascension 5, he gives himself damage reduction which is a huge buff. Huge. That allows him to not be one-shot by heroes like Divine Yolanda, which gives him an additional bump in value. On top of that, he has a 2-turn silence on his basic ability, which is really cool. And his ultimate ability can hit really hard. So not only is he a support hero, but he can be a threat himself. So definitely one of the top tier epics in the game for sure. He kind of was as soon as he was introduced, and he remains that way to this day. He did get a slight knock in value whenever Jerome was introduced, but that is not to say that he is not worthy. So in the B tier, we have Jabez. So Jabez has actually started to climb up in value a little bit. The main reason for this is because of heroes like Karma. So Karma grants herself additional turns whenever she cleanses. Same thing with Royce. Jabez can be a straight counter to Royce or Karma, and that is what has increased his value. On top of that, if he ends up one-shotting the Royces or the Karmas, he grants himself invincible, and he can be utilized to take out other tanks with his ultimate. So he has the possibility of countering up to 2 units or taking out 2 units. And that's why I think he's worthy of that B tier. I think he's really climbed up in value lately. So Morgan is another one that I think has climbed up in value. This is a crowd control unit that does have plenty of counters, but at the same time, the fact that Morgan pairs so nicely with Guan Yu to do additional counterattacks and power up Guan Yu to help take out some tanks has really increased his value. On top of that, he also pairs nicely with Fire Melisa. She's definitely going to take a turn first, so he'll get at least 1 counterattack in, and you have the possibility of stunning, which you should use him in stun set. I think he's a great support hero, and a lot of people can probably get by in RTA with just using someone like Guan Yu, Fire Melisa, and Morgan. It'd be a really strong arena offense team to help you be able to farm, some of those token currencies and place well whenever arena reset happens. So next up, we have Anam Maros. Anam Maros, not only a great PvE hero for Void Tower and Mythic, but he is a true threat in arena as well. He's a very fast hero, and on top of that, he's a threat of his own. If an Anam Maros goes unchecked, he can just solo an entire team. He is in the B tier because I do think that there's plenty of crowd control champions out there that can make an Anam Maros pick kind of bad. He also does need to have a lot of speed because there are plenty of people that can outpace him. but he does outpace a lot of people. But at the same time, all of the downsides in there where he actually needs to take a turn, plenty of crowd control people out in the meta right now, but still one of those heroes that if he goes unchecked, he can just completely solo an entire team. So I think he's definitely worthy of the B tier. Next is Tidecaller. I made a specific video on Tidecaller. Fantastic hero in the fact that he doesn't need to have any kind of focus to land his ultimate ability. It can't be resisted. So if you go up against these heroes that are just super tanky, they have the ability to not get one shot or even two shot, and you need to find a way to make them useless. Tidecaller is a really great option. He's a solid counter to Oderic. He's a really solid counter to Vengeful Hassle. On top of that, a lot of people don't know that a hero that is frozen actually takes additional damage. It's just viewed as a bad debuff because whenever you hit somebody that is frozen, they have the possibility of being unfrozen, which is bad. But with his trait, when he's ascended, not ascended, sorry. Yeah, when he's ascended, I believe they take additional damage. So it does go hand in hand. But with his base trait, the freeze can't be removed. So compare that with someone who's unresistible on his ultimate for a 2-turn freeze, an extremely fast hero, and then the freeze ends up doing additional damage. I think it's just a great all-around unit, and one of the heroes that helps you compete with Light and Dark Legendary heroes. So moving on to the C tier, I'm actually going to talk about these twins in tandem. So the first one, Aristotle, I believe his name is. He has a really cool trait similar to Shane, where when a team member is about to die, he actually allows them to live, and then he heals them back up by 50% of their max health, which is absolutely fantastic. If he ends up having his Ascended trait too, he counters with his ultimate ability, which applies a unique debuff called Power Suppression, which guarantees hits are like deflects. Now, this only truly applies to like AoE abilities, so it's going to be really strong against like the Neros, Ataras, things like that of the world. But if he ends up, surviving and he gets to loop back around to his turn, whenever he uses his ultimate ability again, he can apply crit rate down 2, which I think just can take over a game, which is awesome. But if you don't want to use him just for his trait, he has the ability to put block up on people as well as defense up 2 to enhance some of your damage dealers, similar to Nero. Really strong, and he also removes buffs on his basic. He's just a really nice unit in general. So I do think he's strong. Just his trait alone probably allows him a C grade, along with putting up damage, reducing effects in block, make him pretty strong. Now his brother Solgus is really interesting too. The only issue with Solgus is I think he's a little bit easier to play around because his trait procs if he's about to take fatal damage, not like Aristotle, where it's anybody who takes fatal damage. But if he does die, he actually grants death immunity to your entire team, which is cool. And with that, all of his abilities, he kind of goes into this like air raid mode similar to Doomweaver Valyria. But when he's in that death state, his skills are actually enhanced. He gives people like lifesteal, which is additional to his ultimate that just gives kind of shield. He puts no positive effects on people. Really cool. So I think he's a very strong unit. I don't think enough people have him, let alone have either of these twins booked to truly see their potential yet. But just on paper, they look quite good and can definitely be some solid picks in the RTA setting. So moving on, we have Baron. So Baron has definitely fallen out of the meta from the extreme high ends of RTA. But Baron is still a really good pick for arena offense, utilizing the jump spell to go into her. She does so much damage. One of the few heroes that are actually AoE in the game. So she can be a true force. And then, like, in the mid-tier levels of RTA, you know, pairing her with a Holly or something, jumping into her, she can be a cleave hero, similar to, like, a Giranol or a Urian. So she's still a really strong pick, but it is hard to utilize her definitely on the higher ends. She's just way too squishy. There's too many threats, similar to, like, Fire Melisa and stuff like that running around, that she's probably not worth it. So next we have regular Hassel. So Hassel is still very viable, again, in, you know, arena offense settings, as well as some mid-tier arena, to throw off the speed balance. You know, his trait to give people, you know, additional speed is really nice. And he's one of the, you know, few heroes in the game that grant a instant bonus turn. Something like that can't go unnoticed. Definitely a strong hero. Definitely should not be overlooked. Next up, we have Hori. So Hori, I think, is strong. If your opponent ends up going with a bunch of heroes that are kind of glass cannons, Hori can spiral just like Bocce. Obviously, not as good as Bocce because there are stronger heroes in the game, like tank-related heroes, in comparison to just like a bunch of glass cannons. Hori is a really nice counter to Rosalai, I will say. He's quite fast, so he usually outspeeds Rosalai. And he completely ignores her blocks, which is a big thing with Rosalai in order to survive before she gets to her ultimate ability. So with her rise in value, that's why I've put Hori more in the C range, because he does take out a, you know, a higher end threat in endgame arena, as well as being a hero with upside that can spiral if he goes unchecked. So Jonathan, still really good hero against AoE damage dealing teams. He also puts attack down, defense down on heroes. He can be run in a stun set. He's still a very solid support hero with upside to be a damage dealer as well. He's just overshadowed now by like people like Badmar and stuff like that, but he's still a worthy pick. The meta has just kind of gone away from AoE heroes, pretty much because we don't have a whole lot of them. But he's still strong, and he should not be overlooked, but he is definitely worthy of the C tier, where, you know, maybe 6 months ago he's in the A range or B range. So Kyle is definitely a epic that people have been overlooking. The problem with Kyle is he suffers from his glyphs. His glyphs don't give him enough speed. He has some of the highest base speed in the entire game, which is a bummer. You can still get him fast enough, for sure. Kyle is one of the few counters to Adeline, actually. He has the ability to steal Adeline's really strong debuff, you know, that takes away a threat or two, depending on how long you get to utilize Kyle as Adeline. On top of that, though, he is a really good pick to anybody that has a lot of speed. He's an okay pick, you know, to use to morph into like a dark Ophelia, a light Ophelia, divine Yolanda. So he has a lot of applications with his morph trait. You do need to watch out for Cordelias and things like that, but overall he has a lot of really nice LD heroes that he can hit with his trait that utilize just his speed. So really a nice hero. Orgy is another hero that I think is actually slept on as well. This is a hero that can definitely spiral. Light Nick has risen up in the meta a little bit more. He's a really nice counter to Light Nick. So the possibility of Orchi being brought in to kind of mitigate that first turn advantage from some of these powerful LDs, I think he is a pretty viable pick. The thing right now is there's not as many water heroes in the meta, so Orchi loses a little bit of value there, but I still think he's a pretty strong C pick. He could be borderline D, but I think C is an okay spot for him. All right, so the D picks, you know, you have people like Alistair. Alistair is a good hero. He can be a threat. He also disrupts, right? He has that trait that allows him to stun whoever's next in line on your opponent's team, which can really work out in your favor. If he's ascended, he gets bonus turns, which is a downside as well. And with the introduction of Guan Yu, he ends up going at the end of the round. So Guan Yu can actually counterattack him if Guan Yu survives. But yeah, with the control has diminished in value because, like I said before, the immunity set, you have people like Karma, Royce, Colona all running around. And he is a little bit slow and squishy, so he's hard to use. But an unchecked Alistair, again, is one of those heroes similar to Anam Maros, where if he gets to go, he could end up, wiping a team. Moving on, we have Andre. Andre is, again, another really nice counter to Rosalie. He's an okay pick against, what's her name? Alicia. Alicia is already going to have done her damage, though. He's a decent pick against some of the Nyx, but you got to be careful with how you tune him with his power. He's not a fantastic hero anymore. He used to be like in the A tier. He used to just be a total menace. But nowadays, he's just kind of like a niche counter pick for the Rosalies of the world. So Augustine is okay. He can be an okay pick against some of these defense-based heroes. He can be decent against people like Evelyn Firston, who's a rare pick. He can be okay against Zoltan. So he's definitely deserved of the D tier, but he does have the ability to counterattack for big splash damage, and he has defense pierce, which should not go unnoticed. He is just he should be a really rare pick for people. Next up, we have Borden. Borden actually has some applications again because the Nyx have started to rise a little bit. Light Nyx, Dark Nyx, still pretty good against them. He does offer stealth, which is pretty nice as well. And he does have the ability to one-shot a Adeline if she's already hit and she's not a tanky build. It's not a great counter as I'm talking through this. He also has the ability to hit through a Vengeful Hassle death immunity buff that he's put up on the team. So he does have his applications. He's definitely an okay hero, but for sure more of a niche pick. Same thing with C. Kane. If you're going up against a team that has a lot of crowd control, like Anam Maros or something like that, he does have the ability to cleanse all of that, and then a team-wide invincibility is something that I don't think should be overlooked, but it's going to be few and far between wherever he's a decent pick. Bruzak, this is another guy that used to be a really top-tier epic. I think he's okay still. There is a lot of single-target damage in the meta, so I think maybe a little underutilized. I don't know when I would bring him in, to be honest. He's one of the few heroes that actually does AoEs, which is pretty cool. He has an AoE taunt and an AoE damage-dealing skill that gives defense up and things like that. But the fact that there's so much single target damage going on in the meta, I actually think he would be a decent pick just towards the mid to lower end ranges of RTA. Crixus, sadly, this guy was like, he could have been good. He just doesn't have enough damage. His stats are a little too low, but he's got the speed. He's got some pretty unique things going on with his trait. I used to use him as a counter to Bocce. He could definitely outspeed Bocce and then do damage through Bocce's damage reduction buff. But that's really his only niche for, some squishier water threats. And there aren't a lot of them. Like, he might be good against Anam Maros, but I don't think he can even outspeed. It's more so of a Bocce, Andre, that kind of stuff. So Foodie is similar to like a Sema. He can transfer some buffs. He has some heals. So he's an okay support. But overall, he's going to be a PvE hero. But his kit in general, to just be able to heal, add blocks, transfer debuffs back onto the opponent, I think could be a decent counter pick if your roster is limited. Galeno is another hero that used to be top tier, but I just think there's so much crowd control mitigation nowadays that he's not quite where he needs to be. D actually might be a little low. I feel like some people might be sleeping on him. He provides attack down too, which can be a really nice debuff. Also AoE silence, puts up blocks on your main damage dealer. Pretty neat, but yeah, he just doesn't seem to be used as often anymore, mainly for his speed. It's not where it needs to be, and then also there's just a lot of counters to crowd control nowadays. Hackin, you know, overshadowed by Atara for sure. If you don't have an Atara, Hackin can be a decent hero to buff up the stats of your team. He used to be a great epic pick before Atara came out, but since then he's obviously been overshadowed. But for a lower to mid-tier RTA player, you know, Hackin is still an okay pick. Hazel, another hero that has that is actually probably overshadowed. You know, a heal, also has a revive, has the ability to do some kind of crowd control. Pretty unique hero. I think again she is overlooked, but she's never going to make it in the higher ends of Arena or RTA, so she is a low to mid like mid-level account pick for RTA to get your wins on the lower ends of RTA. Hugh's pretty fast. He's one of the fastest heroes in the game. He provides defense down, not defense down, speed down. He can counterattack. He's kind of a niche pick against some you know, faster teams that are squishy. So I would say that he has the ability to disrupt, but really niche. So Karami is another one of the new Light and Dark epics that they introduced not too long ago. He has a pretty cool trait if he's ascended, where he can counterattack somebody when they grant a bonus turn and give them silence. And the silence is unresistible if he lands the flame bomb. There's not enough testing done with this hero. I don't know if the flame bomb needs focus or anything like that either. But if he needs high focus, it might take away from his utility. But anytime someone grants a bonus turn, he'll put the silence on the person that got the bonus turn. So he could be a pretty decent counter to, you know, the Holias of the world, you know, Hassel, things like that. But again, just a real, truly niche pick. So Lodric is just like, you know, a mini version of Shark Solandre. Obviously not as good. He removes buffs whenever he uses his ultimate. His damage is, you know, similar to SSA, you know, based off of his max health. I think he's a nice little kind of niche counter pick, but definitely only in that setting. So he's most likely a D. There is some possibility that I'm wrong here. He's one of the heroes that I think I might be wrong about, but at the same time, with so much crowd control being mitigated, I feel like he probably doesn't have a whole lot of use in the meta currently. So Lightwing Zach used to, like, he's gone through a roller coaster of his usefulness. He used to be crazy before he got nerfed, and even when he was nerfed, he was still kind of good, but since the introduction of all these new heroes, he's kind of been power crept. I think on the lower ends of RTA, you know, when people don't have their gear well enough or anything like that, he could be a decent threat and maybe a counter pick if they just have a lot of counterattacks or debuffs or extra attacks on your team. But he is obviously very susceptible to people like Cordelia and things like that. So definitely still a niche pick. Same thing with Lunar Mala. You know, she's probably really good for an early to mid-game account. She has an AoE taunt. If you can get her fast enough, you know, she's going to completely take over the game for heroes that aren't prepared for her. But that's probably where she ends her usefulness. Marion Shadowblood is a hero that I think can be brought in against tank units. She does true damage. She also has damage mitigation, and she heals herself back up. So I think she can be pretty viable on the lower end tiers against people that bring in a bunch of tanks. Next up, we have Nathalia. So Nathalia, again, lower end mid-game account. if you want her to be your nuking champion, she has that possibility. She's going to need some support, or you're going to have to be going up against heroes or enemies that don't really have a whole lot of speed. But she will fall off drastically as somebody to be your main damage dealer and your threat. But, you know, for the lower end tiers, she's going to be one of your heroes that you're building up for dungeons and stuff like that. And she can transition over into arena, so she's not completely useless, but she's definitely someone that will fall off whenever it comes to the higher end arena. So for Ricard also used to be a really strong hero in PvP, but there are just so many strong fire units right now. He's really not viable. You know, the tank units in this game are they're somewhat limited now to the light and dark heroes, so he can't really go toe to toe with them. He has a really cool like ultimate ability that goes on a cooldown. It probably doesn't even need the cooldown anymore. But with that being said, yeah, not really viable. His ultimate also has the ability to not be able to be dodged. So he was kind of a cool counter to like Lydia and stuff whenever she was a nuisance in arena, but that was a long time ago. So just the lower end kind of tier. Silent is your RNG hero. She's a decent support. She's more of an arena defense hero for sure. But at the same time, I think if you utilize her on the lower ends of RTA, she can be a bit of a nuisance, but she again will fall off drastically. So Virgil is a fast hero that provides an AoE silence, you know, similar to Galeno. He's just there for kind of crowd control. He does have the ability to maybe do some damage, but I would never advise anybody to like book him or anything. He's kind of just there to disrupt. You know, if you have him, if you have multiple ascensions of him or whatever, you can definitely utilize him to disrupt as your support. But that's really all he'll do. Winstrex, very fast hero, has the ability to speed up people along with attack up, so really nice for a low to mid tier account. You know, win yourself the speed battle, and then have all of your, you know, glass cannon nukers go in and basically destroy the team before they even have a chance. But again, she will fall off pretty quick, and she gets hard countered by Fire Melisa for sure. So Sacred Winstrex, she is like a budget version of Brand, you know, introduces big shield to everybody, puts damage up on people. I think she can be an okay tank support, you know, for a mid-tier RTA player. She again will fall off though. The nice thing is though, she's pretty decent in other areas of the game, so she can fulfill multiple roles, you know, from PvE to also PvP. Trista is another one that was really good in PvE, but if you utilize her in PvE and decide to book her out, which I think there's some merit if you really like Guild versus Environment and things like that, she can transition to a decent damage dealer on the lower end tiers of RTA, but like most of the heroes in this D tier, just going to fall off pretty fast. Vance is a niche pick. He can get a decent amount of bonus turns if you're dealing with somebody that's going to bring in a lot of buffs. Sadly, his damage just isn't there. He used to be a great hero, and then they completely nerfed him into the ground, which sucked. It's funny. They buffed him first because he wasn't good enough, and then he was too good, and then they nerfed him. And he has since stayed in this like really niche area where if your opponent brings in like a bunch of blue heroes and some of them are given buffs and stuff and he can grant extra turns or whatever, then maybe he's a decent pick. So then the rest of these heroes, in my opinion, are all just PvE related. I don't think they have any use in PvP. That's my opinion, whether they're too slow or whether their kit truly is just built for PvE. That's why I think they kind of need to remain in the F tier. But that is the epic PvP tier list, guys. I'm planning on doing a PvE tier list in the future. You know, maybe a month or two down the road. Who knows? Maybe it could be sooner. But I did want to get out the PvP list just because I have more and more experience in that end of the game. I have to do a little more research for the PvE side. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed, guys. That's all I got for you today, and I will catch you on the next one. Thanks. See ya.